Hello, Bruce McDonald. We're going to talk about your new movie, Dreamland, today. But would you tell me how you're handling COVID-19?
Gosh, how am I handling COVID-19? I'm being very productive, doing a lot of writing, a lot of scheming,
Hmm.
cooking with my family. I'm kind of becoming a hell of a cook. And, feel very fortunate. We're kind of some of the lucky ones. We're not burdened by sickness or death, so we feel very fortunate and happy to be in this community and in this country.
Okay. And what community is that?
Well, I live in Little Italy in Toronto, and it's a
Oh,
great neighborhood of, little cafes and, Italian businesses and Japanese businesses. It's a great little hood.
sounds cool. So, all right, shifting gears. What was the inspiration to make Dreamland?
The inspiration to make Dreamland, I think, was Stephen McCaddy. He's the actor in the movie, plays two characters. And I've had the great fortune and privilege to work with Steve over the years and a lot of different TV projects and movie projects. And he's just one of my all-time favorite actors. So I guess it came from the desire to keep the band together. And so we were inspired by Stephen. We were inspired by Alice Cooper. We were inspired by William Burroughs, the junkie novelist, and of course, Chet Baker.
Right. Yeah. Well, of course, you guys worked together on Pontypool, which is a great movie.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. So you've got Juliette Lewis and Henry Rollins in this movie too, and I would love to hear about the working relationship with them.
Well, Juliette is just like a beautiful. I've always admired her body of work. I mean, it's just kind of amazing, and she's just one of those actresses that is fearless and likes to play, and is so accomplished in her art that even when she makes mistakes, it's gold. So she plays the character of the Countess, who is this kind of eccentric, uber rich woman that's throwing a wedding party for her brother, who's a vampire, and his child bride. So Juliette, being the lovely, beautiful actress that she is, was gracious in coming out to play with us. And Henry. And it's funny because Juliette is a musician too. She has a band. Henry, right, of course, has his band, Black Flag, and other things. So Juliette's a kind of an actress that has dabbled into or moved into music, and Henry's a musician that's kind of come to acting. So he was really happy to be there, and I must say, maybe people's first impressions of him through photographs or whatever are intimidating and frightening, but he's got to be one of the most generous, intelligent, kind-hearted men I think I've ever met. He's just quite an accomplished character. Anyway, so he did great. He really prepared, and he had a lot of fun. And the other actors, Stephen McCaddy and Juliette Lewis and Lisa Houle, they all were kind of protective of Henry because they wanted him to do great, and they kind of helped, I guess, with some of their lifelong acting chops to, make sure that Henry felt supported and one of the band members.
That sounds like a fun time. Sounds like this
super
was an enjoyable project.
Well, when you get to, they're kind of both heroes of mine. Actually, Stephen is too. So when you get to the opportunity once in a while to work with your heroes, my job becomes very easy because these people bring so much to the table. I become kind of the conductor or the band leader, I suppose. And yeah, it's a real pleasure to play with people like this.
Dreamland has an interesting relationship with conspiracy theories. How would you explain the relation seen in this project with conspiracy theories?
Well, you got to talk to Stephen McCaddy for that. He's the king of conspiracy theories, and it's odd, when you go at something, and in this case, it seemed to be like a modern day fairy tale, but there were these echoes of things that were happening in the real world, like child slavery and the bad behavior of the uber rich, and little shimmers of like underground Al-Qaeda. There's all these sort of strange little currents that we can't help, I guess, but be a part of in this modern world. So when you kind of package a little fairy tale up, you're bound to kind of have these little shimmers and echoes with whether these things are conspiracies or they're kind of urban legends or myths. It could be a strange and kind of shivery connection.
Do people get pissed off at you for including them in this movie?
Not really. They seem to kind of go on the ride. Yeah. I mean, maybe. I haven't heard, but I'm sure, you do anything and somebody's bound to be pissed off. But
true.
Yeah.
I think we sometimes audience members are underestimating their intelligence, and it's all good. Like it's a movie, and this isn't a documentary or anything. It's a cool expression of sort of trying to be like a current zeitgeist, right? Yeah,
I mean, testament goes to our writer Tony Burgess and Patrick Whistler. They're as tapped in as anybody, and anything you make, it can't help but become hopefully part of the conversation and the current sort of, because we're kind of engaging with things. And you're right, audiences are much smarter than I think are often given credit for. And it's really interesting, especially with this movie, to hear how people interpret it or what they think it is, because we try to resist, the impulse to explain things too much. We tried to kind of leave the door open, or we tried to leave the hatchway open, so people could kind of come up with their own interpretation or find that echo that is something that they feel in the modern day world that sort of echoes with that. So it's really interesting when, in this day of, media and social networking and stuff, there's all kinds of conversations going on. And when a movie comes out, people are really happy to discuss and to talk and debate. And that's what's, it's really a lively response, and it's exciting when that happens.
Were there any movies or directors you were trying to channel for this movie, or were just catching a little inspiration from?
Well, that's a good question. There's a great movie by an American filmmaker, John Cassavetes, who made a film called The Killing of a Chinese Bookie. So it's set in a kind of club world, and that was a big inspiration. I would say there's an old French film called Les Samurai about a contract killer. It's made in the early 60s, very stylish and very kind of film noir. So film noir movies were sort of inspirational. But there are other things too, like writers. I don't know if you know Raymond Chandler, who's an American detective guy.
The Big Sleep.
Yeah. I mean, I'd never read him before, but I thought, we're going to go into this world. So, I read a couple of his books, The Big Sleep and Lady of the Lake, and I was like, this guy's amazing. So it's just the stylishness of it and the lingo. So he was a great inspiration. Maybe William Burroughs a little bit, who I mentioned, who's wrote The Naked Lunch, who's a kind of an American expatriate poet, heroin addict, surrealist kind of guy. So he was a kind of a good model. And then, gosh, I mean, I'm sure there's some other movies and stuff that of course, there's a great film about Chet Baker called Let's Get Lost that was made. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a great portrait of a musician. Like, this is Chet Baker in the later days of his life, kind of senior Chet Baker, I guess, in this beautiful black and white portrait. And the last movie that I'll bring up is made by a Canadian guy, and his name is Robert Boudreau, and he made, he's known for a film called Born to be Blue, which is about Chet Baker, but he made a short film before that called The Death of Chet Baker, where he imagines how did Chet Baker really die in that Amsterdam hotel room. And it's a brilliant short film. So those are all really great inspirations for us.
I can sort of get a sense now of the minimal ambience from Les Samurai, especially with the big, hotel stuff.
Yeah, totally. There's that kind of in Le Samurai, and it's made by this guy. I've only seen that. There's other movies. He's quite a well-known character, Jean-Pierre Melville.
Yeah.
Made mostly crime movies, like the way John Ford made westerns. He made crime movies, and he was very. But that film especially, yeah, you're right. There is this kind of minimalist kind of vibe to it, and this quietness, and the type of character that is in that movie, the French movie. You know, we kind of tried to steal as much as we could for our movie. So it's great. You know, you get to carry on the traditions of certain things. And that's, I think, the great joys of being a storyteller or a filmmaker, that you realize there is a great tradition in pretty much any genre or any type of movie, and you're part of the continuing story. So you try to learn from the masters, and you try to carry the ball another couple of yards up the field.
Wow. So it's great to hear all these influences. You clearly love culture and art, and it's amazing. So how did you get into filmmaking?
Gosh, that's a good question. I guess, well, like a lot of people growing up, you just love movies. I loved movies like 2001. I think the first movie I ever saw was Mary Poppins and The Wizard of Oz. So there's a very foundational kind of impressions on my young suburban mind. But I think it was probably from my uncle Jim. And when I was a teenager, he gave me a Super 8 camera for my birthday or something. It was passed on to me. And I became quite dazzled by the power of this little machine that in the hands of a powerless suburban kid, I could get people to dress up. I could get them to do things they might not ordinarily do. I could get into places that were usually not verboten to go into, because hey, we're here making a student movie, and suddenly doors would open and people would help out. And so that's what kind of, I guess, got me going. I was like, wow, this little camera thing, that's like a passport to adventure. So that kind of kicked it open. I went to film school. I worked as an editor. I worked with lots of different departments, and eventually found my way into directing. And it's one of the best jobs in the world. I love it.
And I know Hardcore Logo is a classic.
Yes, well, that was that. I love that movie. It was a Vancouver-based project by a great writer, Michael Turner. Because all great movies, they start with the writing, and people always ask me. They go, "Wow, how do you think that turned out so well, or why is it that it's quite a beloved?" Everybody from my family to Quentin Tarantino loved that movie, and I think it starts with the writing. It starts with Michael Turner's book, which oddly is a book of poetry. That's, if you look at the original book that the movie's based on, it's a book of poetry, and it's kind of amazing. And a great cast: Callum Rennie and Hugh Dillon, and all those guys. And it was just. I'm a frustrated musician, so for me it was just the closest thing I could do to be in a band and be a terrible guitar player.
So that movie was Rolling Thunder DVD, right?
Yeah, that's right. Quentin Tarantino had this label called Rolling Thunder, and he saw the movie in Austin, Texas, in this film festival. And we were kind of amazed that he showed up. I mean, he often goes to that festival because he's friends with Rodriguez and some of the other cats around there, the independent filmmakers, and just loved it. Took us for beers after, and we all, got to sit at the feet of the master, and he was just like you would think he was. He was really charming and funny and talkative. And at the end, he says, I got this label that they let me pick films that I really like, and I put them out. And we were like, okay, that sounds great. So yeah, it's nice when those, these sort of people, a guy like Quentin who remains true to his independent spirit, he goes out of his way to help people because people helped him out. And it's, it's a really generous thing to do that. A guy like that in his position doesn't really have to do anything, but he is one of those guys that genuinely loves movies. Even at the Oscars this year, you saw him get the big thank you from the wonderful South Korean filmmaker, Parasite, who saluted Quentin, because Quentin had been a champion of him for years, right? For a lot of his early movies, Quentin would always be posting about them or saying, you got to check this out. So, even at that sort of great height, he remains a great champion of like the people making films outside the gates of Hollywood.
Yeah, it's good stuff. What are the biggest changes you've seen affect the industry during your career?
Well, I mean, technology is a huge one, I suppose, because, when we started out, to make just even a short film, you needed to rent a camera from a place. You needed to find a giant editing machine in a room somewhere in a thing. You needed to take your film to a laboratory to actually process it. So it was a very, unwieldy process. Whereas today, you can do all that kind of with your cell phone. So the technology has really liberated a lot of you from these constraints of before. It was a kind of remote operation that only specialists could really do. I mean, it's still like that somewhat in this day and age, but if you're a beginning filmmaker, it's so much more available. The tools, to edit and to mix and to shoot, it's kind of amazing. I mean, television has, like when I was young, movies were for adults and television was for kids. And now it's the other way around, that movies are for kids and television is for adults. And I'm talking in a very general way. Mm-hmm. Television has become this very sophisticated novelistic story machine, with all these different series and, these different people in a way in delivering, now it comes right into your home. I mean, that was not like that when I was a kid. Like you had to go to the Albion Mall to see a movie, or you watch a horror movie on late night Buffalo television. But that was pretty much your access point. Now it's just a huge cornucopia, I suppose, of choices. So maybe more than ever, it's important that people look to, people like yourself that are kind of helping to guide people towards things that they might find interesting, because people maybe are, with such an abundance of choice, people look more and more to the curators and the people with the knowledge to kind of help them decide what to watch. So yeah, it's very interesting. So those are the main things I've seen, I guess. And in Canada, I've seen a huge growth from a kind of a very cottage industry. And I'm speaking from my growing up in Toronto, but in the 70s, there wasn't really much going on compared to now, which is Toronto's now like the, second or third biggest movie town in perhaps the world in terms of production and facilities and studios and crew people. And people are shooting in Ottawa, and they're shooting in Montreal, and they're shooting in Winnipeg and Vancouver. So this has been a huge growth, I think. I'm kind of amazed by it, because when I was a kid, you had to go to New York or Los Angeles to work in the movies or television. It's not that way anymore. People come here to work. I'm
wondering, we were talking about the cast of Dreamland. Who was the MVP of the crew?
The MVP of the crew is Keith White, our assistant director. That's a very good question. Keith is a really talented, and assistant director, for people who don't know, is kind of like my lieutenant. And so the assistant director is there to kind of organize the day, in the clock, keep things moving. He's kind of like the straw boss, or the foreman, or the captain. He kind of rallies the troops, and he helps me, get the day, so to speak. But he was, because we were shooting with an all Belgian Luxembourg crew. So Keith ended up being quite adored and loved by all the people. He had to lie a little bit to get the job, because they wanted somebody that spoke French, and Keith said he did speak French, but I think it was more like my French, which was sort of a grade 3 French. So, we made great efforts, but most of the crew spoke English. But yeah, Keith was just, it's great when you have those people on the set, because they become, like you said, the MVP. They become the sort of the moral center, and they become kind of the cheerleader and the coach. They're kind of like, yeah, let's go. And there's a positive go for it, because it's a struggle, doing anything in a way. There's always hardships and, obstacles to overcome. But I got to say, Keith White came through like a champ, and it's nice to have those people. Thank you for asking that.
No problem. So what's your best piece of advice to stay in the filmmaking industry?
Wow. I would say you got to look at it like a long distance run. Like it's not a short game, and it's like a lifelong game. And the rewards aren't instant and they're not quick. And there's a lot of apprenticing and there's a lot of, kind of training before you can even come close to becoming a master at what you do. And I'm talking not just directors, but in grips or cinematographers or hair people or costume. These are all, really talented and really kind of amazing artists of what they do. And their contribution, some of these contributions are not talked about as much as other things, and their contributions are more unconscious. But when you sort of look at, say, for example, somebody that does hair, it's kind of amazing how they can tell the story with their art. So I would say, patience and the long distance run, because it is, and the rewards don't come quickly. So if you have that kind of long distance gene in you or that thing, you may make it through the obstacle course. And if you don't, it's probably just not the game for you. But it is. I remember somebody asking me once, they said, how would you describe a crew, or what is a crew? And I started the film business. I said, well, one way to think of it, it's kind of like the army for hippies, because it's a very regimented kind of structure. Like it's extremely military operation in a way. But all the people in this army, in this military structure, are all crazy a little bit. They're all artists and they're all kind of a bit eccentric, and and I'm talking everybody, either the Jenny operator and the drivers and the fourth electric, these are all people at some point, they have these creative desires, and this is what draws them. It's like kind of the people that run away and join the circus, or, so it's a beautiful kind of contradiction, the world of the set and the filmmaking, because it is this, extremely regimented, disciplined structure, which I think people like, and then it's just complete craziness at times.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Bruce. Before I let you go, could you please tell me what you have planned for the rest of the year? When the borders open, I'd like to go to Detroit and see my friend and have a drink at Cliff Bell's, which is a great Art Deco bar in Detroit. I would like to go canoeing. I've never been canoeing. My daughter and I were talking about that the other day, and could go canoeing in a wilderness thing. And then work-wise, there's a TV project that we're planning for August. It's called Mallory Towers. It's based on a series of young adult books about a girls' school in England. So we shoot, the exteriors there, and we shoot the interiors here. Yeah, and then a couple of movie projects that we're sort of cooking and polishing up and chasing rich guys for money for, the usual. So, hope to kind of, help in whatever way I can to get through this, the global pandemic, and help out in my community and my friends, and try to keep on the right path, and become, help to be part of this great community. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.